you're very well aware of drone warfare, drone warfare at this point. You know a thing or two about it. Not just because, I mean, you come from a background in aviation as an Air Force Special Operations pilot, but also what you've seen around the world, and particularly in Ukraine. I'm going to kind of consult my notes here a little bit, but by 2024, some Ukrainian estimates said drones accounted for 69% of strikes on troops and 75% on vehicles and equipment. When we look at this, has the war in Ukraine permanently changed what warfare is at this point?
Yes, absolutely. And I think the latest numbers I hear from Ukrainians is like something around 80% of Russian casualties killed and wounded are now caused by small tactical drones. So, I mean, I think the way I've described, because you hear a lot of people who analyze drone warfare, and they tend to focus on what drones are going to replace. Do drones replace stealth fighter jets or tanks or javelins? And I'd argue they don't replace anything. What they do is they add another option for warfare. Mm-hmm. It's like a painter with a new color on his palette to which he can create a more beautiful picture, right? Mm-hmm. They give you more options. And so, my former background as an Air Force Special Operations pilot, basically the way my aircraft fit into the war is that if you had a special operations team going out to attack a compound somewhere in Afghanistan or Iraq, before that raid, you would have what we call a stack of aircraft built over that target. So you got like my plane providing ISR and other options. You'd have fighter jets. You'd have Predator, large, very high-tech surveillance drones flying around. You got refueling tankers flying around somewhere else. You got AWACS flying. You have all this metal in the air providing this like very networked architecture of capabilities to support the dude on the ground. And so when you have a special operator attacking a compound, he's got basically on the radio an eye in the sky, like, hey, there's a bad guy behind that wall, or somebody hiding in that bush. Mm-hmm. You're getting like this spectacular support through these assets in the sky, who can also obviously put weapons on target to take out the enemy. So it is an enabling and a force multiplier for our ground forces that like massively increased what they could accomplish, but also saved lives, and something we got quite dependent on over time too. Our special operations force on the ground became quite accustomed to having constant ISR coverage, constant ability to get close air support. Anyway, that whole architecture, that stack, is dependent upon having air dominance. Yep. You can't fly all that stuff if you're worried about an enemy fighter jet or an enemy surface-to-air missile taking somebody out, right? Like my plane, we had a lot of advanced stuff on our plane, but the actual airframe wasn't that advanced. We're just putting around at a certain altitude. We're sitting ducks if our enemy had any capability to shoot us down. In Ukraine now, and this is a product of tactics and doctrine, the Ukrainians are able to replicate the effects of that stack that we implemented using like all these advanced fighter jets and satellite coverage and all that stuff. They can do all that now with small drones. Mm-hmm. And I would say maybe even more effectively in some instances. So they create these, what I would call like an air littoral stack. So a stack in the low altitude airspace comprising solely small tactical drones. So many of them like basically repurposed or reimagined commercial drones. And they've got fixed wing ISR, quadcopter bombers, fixed wing bombers. They've got the FPV drones, which are controlled by a pilot wearing virtual reality glasses. They've got unmanned ground vehicles going out there delivering supplies and deploying other drones and mines. This whole this whole network, this whole cluster of unmanned assets, recreating what we did with these more advanced tools. And you can accomplish all this without having established air superiority in the conventional understanding of what air superiority is, right? Mm-hmm. Neither side has air dominance on the battlefield in Ukraine, but I could imagine a situation where maybe Russia had established air dominance. Ukrainians could still reposition these clouds of drones, so to speak, mm-hmm. these air littoral stacks over a part of the battlefield, even if Ukrainian or Russian fighter jets are flying around, and establish for a brief moment in time something equivalent to air superiority over that part of the battlefield using drones. Because each one of these drone stacks is basically its own self-contained little unit with kill chains operating within the unit, operating extremely quickly So you got, ISR quadcopters talking to FPV teams, finding and eliminating targets in very short time orders without having to radio back to some tactical operations center or joint operations center, getting, approval to go after the targets, all happening very quickly within these teams. And it is able to give the possibility of achieving a certain effect to both Ukrainian and Russian forces that they were never able to achieve before unless they had achieved air superiority first. So it basically takes the establishment of air superiority out of the checklist of things you need to accomplish to achieve a certain effect on the battlefield. That's important for us to understand because we assume if we have air superiority, our adversaries can't do those things to us. Now they can. And also on the flip side, if we went to war against China or even Russia, and they had some, aerial denial capabilities, or they had, a contested airspace, basically, we can still achieve certain effects on the battlefield, even if we have failed to achieve air superiority or air dominance right off the bat, too. So it adds another dimension to warfare that didn't exist previous to 2022. But it doesn't negate the necessity of these other traditional warfighting tools that we have. But we have to learn to accept this new reality and be prepared for it. I think for me, from ground level, the most sort of poignant change I've seen over the 3.5 years of the full-scale war compared. So, prior to 2022, the war was largely like artillery and mortars. And even in the first, I'd say like 1.5 years of the full-scale war is mainly an artillery war. And you go out under artillery fire, it's very scary, obviously. Like any human being is going to feel frightened about it, but you can get used to it. And there are mathematical things you can do under artillery fire to stay safe. You disperse your units. You can go obviously into a basement or a shelter. You drive cars there's a lot of things you can do that are like just ticking the odds in your favor to survive an artillery strike. Well, drones is different because the drone it's not just some trajectory fired into the ether. It's a machine with a human being hunting you, trying to kill you. You can run behind a tree, it's going to go fly around that tree and try and kill you. You can run into a basement, it's going to fly into the basement and try and kill you. You can get a car, it's going to try and fly through the window of the car if it's left open to kill you. Like, you have to outsmart your adversary or outmaneuver that adversary in a way that you don't have to do with artillery. And there's not just simple mathematical things anymore. You literally are in this this man-to-man fight, like this,
it's like the difference between
single battle or something like
fighting
that.
in 2D and now you have to fight in 3D, but you're used to fighting in 2D, and it just...
you think about when you take fire traditionally, what do? You sprawl on the ground just to lower your profile so that in the horizontal plane, you're less of a target. Well, if you do that, that doesn't work with drone warfare, right? Like all these, even like...
You're easier to see sprawled out on the ground.
Or even with artillery fire, what's the most... the day one of basic training, what they tell you to do is spread out, right? So one grenade is not going to kill 10 people. You spread out, and it just reduces the risk of indirect fire killing a massive amount of soldiers. Well, in a drone war, when you're dealing with non-tethered drones, the drones that still get a radio signal, what you see is many ground units will have one dude with an electronic warfare backpack that provides a little jamming bubble around you. So, in those instances, it's better for soldiers to cluster together, to stay within this sort of protective umbrella of electromagnetic jamming so that a drone probably can't get in there and kill you. So spreading out is dangerous because you're out of this protective umbrella. And so these are kind of, very primitive examples, but it does show you that even the most basic level of combat, drone warfare changes. But for me, it was the fear that was so distinct from what I'd experienced in Iraq and Afghanistan as a pilot and as a journalist, because, as a pilot between missions, you go back to your base, you grab a Subway sandwich, play little video games, maybe hit the gym or whatever. But you feel like you have a relatively safe place between missions into which you can decompress, even as a ranger, right? You go back to your
lived on airfields.
You're going to chill, you're going to have a shower, hit the gym, whatever, get some chow with your buddies, and you can decompress. In Ukraine, it's 24/7, you're worried about dying all the time. You're in contact every second of every day. And you always have to be at your best because a drone is going to kill you if you slip up. If you leave a piece of trash outside, the drones are going to know where you're hiding and they're going to kill you. Right? It's always, and that constant psychological stress, maybe like the Battle of Bastogne or something in World War II is equivalent in the sense of like the demands on the grit and courage of the soldiers who fight under such stress. Like that is a type of warfare. Like that is what we're going to face in a war against China.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that our commanders in the training that we're doing now, they understand that that psychological stress is going to be like deterministic, I think, in our ability to endure that kind of conflict.
Well, I want to get to China and what they're doing with drones and its impact on us and our national security. But first, I think it's worth noting that everything that you're saying, like, yeah, it sounds like warfare has changed. You don't put this back in the box, right?
Right.
Like this is something where even when you think about how you train soldiers in basic training, you're no longer, just doing 3 to 5 second rushes and things like that. That's no longer, you have to put an asterisk on everything. Like you said, if there's certain scenarios where no, you don't spread out, you actually group together, things like that. The whole point of things like basic training, these like regular sort of infantry training, right, is to make processes repeatable and without having to think a lot. Like just you can react, you do the battle drill, right? React to contact, react to an ambush. These are things you drill and you can do them almost without even thinking about them. Well, in drone warfare, it's like, no, you need even the most junior private to be playing chess out there with you, right?
Yeah.
Like not that you eliminate the need for small unit leadership or things like that, but I imagine a lot of these guys are still working in small teams and that sort of thing. But it's not, there's no longer just, oh, this happened, we do this. It's now, well, this happened, but what are the conditions? What are the mitigating circumstances of what's the move here? How, like you're asking low level leaders on the battlefield to make decisions of great consequence on matters that most of them, the average soldier is not traditionally trained on. Like you as an aviator in the Air Force are going to understand concepts of drone warfare a lot more easy than somebody that joins the Army to be an infantryman or paratrooper or something like that, right? But really in this, with the environment that you're describing, it seems like the sort of specialist on the battlefield, the private on the battlefield as an infantryman has to understand concepts of aerial warfare, drone warfare as much, if even not even more than an aviator. Has to understand the concepts and the theories and the strategies behind it. And I think that's really interesting. Like if that is what is now going to be asked of our warfighters, of the people that are going out and doing this, and this is what they have to train for, you are fundamentally changing the type of person that you even recruit for.
Yeah. And I think like drone warfare, like, so a Ukrainian soldier friend of mine told me, he said, every soldier now needs to know how to shoot a rifle, how to fly a drone, and drive a car. Mm-hmm. It is a fundamental skill of every soldier to know how to use a drone. And I wouldn't make this argument, but I would say people focus on drones replacing artillery and stealth fighters. I think it's more apt, although I wouldn't totally make this argument, but I would say like we're closer to the end of the spectrum where drones are going to replace rifles, not fighter jets. Like a Ukrainian National Guard brigade I spent some time with in my last trip this summer to Ukraine, they said they had, about a year and a half or 2 years ago, they transitioned mainly to being a drone unit. From originally there was a bunch of guys out there with Kalashnikovs holding the line. Now they use almost exclusively all drones. They say that they probably they can go weeks without actually shooting their rifles. But since they've started using drones, their casualties have gone down by 70% because now they can engage the enemies at distance. Each soldier, so in one battle over a span of like 2 weeks, some of their drone operators were killing well over 100 Russian soldiers apiece. So like you think like the best snipers in the history of warfare, like their kill list, or like, their kill tallies over an entire career might be 100 enemy or something like that. Now you've got like 19-year-old baristas out there killing 100 Russians over a span of a couple of weeks using drones. So like the amplification of the lethality of a soldier is just, it's meteoric with the use of drones. So yeah, like on the most, I think that like the argument always, like I keep saying, like it keeps focusing on these high level weapon systems that drones are replacing, but really at the most like basic boots on the ground, simple level of warfare, drones are having a fundamentally like earth-shattering effect on the basic realities of combat. And I think we need to understand that. And also, like, the advancements we've seen in drone warfare, as I laid out in that analogy of the stack and all that, those advancements aren't necessarily related to any like great leaps in drone warfare technology over the last 3.5 years in Ukraine. They really are leaps in creativity and imagination, the development of doctrine and tactics,